As far as the UK is concerned, legislation to regulate gambling was fairly sparse until recently. Prior to 1960, the governments of the day were broadly on the side of the abolitionists. Since then, however, betting has been subject to greater scrutiny, regulation and taxation. In this section we're going to look at how the law has evolved to cater for changing social attitudes, competition and of course new technology. Now, as I mentioned in the previous section, in line with many other countries, gambling had been taking place in the UK for a long time. On-course bookmaking, as we know, had evolved around about the end of the 18th century. And the 1845 Gaming Act, among many other things, restricted betting just to the racetrack. But interestingly enough, the Act also deemed that bets were not enforceable as a matter of law. Now that's incredible when you think about it, and even more so that this particular idiosyncrasy wasn't done away with until as recently as 2005. The 1960 Betting and Gaming Act, which came into force on the 1st of January 1961, heralded a brand new era. In particular, the legalisation of off-course bookmakers who could operate from licensed betting shops changed the way forever in which we as a nation did our gambling. Prior to this, betting had been confined to the back streets, or for the wealthy, a telephone credit account. Within 6 months, however, of betting shops being legalised, over 10,000 of them had been set up, and it proved a highly lucrative business for those who became bookmakers. Some of the names that profited from this regulation will now be familiar to you: Ladbrokes, Corals, of course they've now merged, William Hill and Betfred. Many other independent bookmakers still operate in various parts of the country. Mark Jarvis, Chisholm and Tolls will be familiar to you. They're names that will mean something if you live in Leicestershire, the North East or Northern Ireland respectively. Now, one of the consequences of the Act was to see a decline in attendance at racecourses and in particular greyhound tracks, of which 90 or so have closed in the intervening period since the legislation. And another, and if you're a certain age you may remember this, was that the windows of betting shops were blacked out or curtained off to avoid corrupting the passing public. Now, to retain an air of respectability, many of these firms, probably with a tongue-in-cheek, called themselves turf accountants. That initial figure of 10,000 betting shops reached a peak of 16,000 in the 1970s, but today the figure's thought to be closer to 9,000. And you can see the split by company in this graph here. Over the past 30 years or so, the pace of change in the betting landscape has been absolutely breathtaking. It wasn't until 1986, believe it or not, that further gambling legislation allowed betting shops to be improved, if you will. The provision of hot drinks, albeit from a machine, brighter interiors with seats for comfort, most importantly of all though, television pictures from the racecourses, revolutionary at the time. Of course, we take it for granted nowadays, as we do so many things, such as live streaming of sports via a mobile app. Sunday racing was another example of progress, the first meeting being in 1992, though even then I recall cash betting on the racecourse itself was forbidden at that race meeting. It wasn't actually until 1995 that betting shops were allowed to even advertise in the shop window. What was the reason for these new developments? Well, money. The government realised that just like any other vice, provided it was legal, it could be taxed and regulated. We'll look at how that has changed in just a moment, as has the betting shop product, what people actually bet on these days.